Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross. Welcome to another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. I'm in my Hawaiian gear here today because we're so hot here in Austin. We're got up to about 95 degrees and lots of sun. So it's just trying to stay comfortable and go with the season here. I hope all of you are having some enjoyable weather wherever you are here in the States or across the world. So the way that these webinars work, well, actually, first of all, welcome to new people. I'm glad to see there's a number of new people that are showing up here tonight. And welcome back to all of those of you that are returning again. I'm glad to see that you keep getting some value out of these and keep showing up. I apologize for having to cancel the last webinar that we had, but we have three scheduled in a row here for June. So we should be able to get lots of information and help out there too. For those of you that are new and coming back, there's two ways you can participate. So it doesn't matter whether you're a newbie or you're a veteran of doing these. One is to see the responses that I give to questions that people ask. The second one is to actually write your own question. Now, be aware, I usually am not able to get through all the questions, but give it a try. And depending on how many people show up tonight, we may have time to take all questions. Sometimes I'm able to get through them, but not all the time. When you write your question, I ask that you, the way you write your question is you do it in the chat box. And when you get to the chat box, you're going to see there's two ways you can do it. You can do it as something called a Q&A only. That's the little question mark. Or you can do it as the chat, which has it looks like there's two screens of people talking to each other. I prefer that you do it through the chat function, okay? All right. And I also keep in mind as you're writing your question, if you would not hit the enter key until your whole question is done. If you hit the enter key before that question is complete, what happens is each time you hit the enter key, it splits it into a separate question and sends it to me, which gets to be a bit difficult from my side of the computer to follow what's going on. Okay. All right. So I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar, and hopefully that goes as planned. Occasionally we get a little snafu there, but generally that turns out well. And then you will get a notification from me tomorrow morning, letting you know that I have edited up the video recording and have created a summary of it for you, and I'll send that information out to you somewhere around 9:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, Austin, Texas time. So look for that tomorrow morning. You will also be able to sign up for next week's webinar when I get that to you. And then finally, I appreciate if you share these emails, share the information that we're doing here with others. I'm trying to reach as many people as I possibly can to help you. All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so this first question is from Ayla or Ala. I'm not sure how you say that, so I apologize if I'm messing that up. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I'm currently on a 3-month course of Rifampin, azithromycin, cryptolepis for treating Bartonella. I know Bartonella requires continuous antibiotics, but I was wondering if I could switch between prescription herbal every 3 to 4 months to give my gut a break from the prescription antibiotics. Unfortunately, I have severe neurologic Bartonellosis, and it looks like I'll be on medication for a while. How do you tend to manage people who are due to be on prescription antibiotics long-term? I'm keen not to take a break as to allow Bartonella space to reproduce. I'm also worried about the breaks of Rifampin, azithromycin, allowing antibiotic resistance to grow. All right, so there's a number of things for me to address here, okay? So first of all, it's very common when people have chronic Bartonella or chronic Borrelia to be on longer-term antibiotics, okay? So you're not alone in that, all right? Now, when people have chronic Bartonella or chronic Borrelia or even chronic Babesia, about 85% of people will get good response on treating Bartonella or even Babesia at about 6 months, okay? So 85% of people, in my experience, require an adequate treatment for about 6 months for both of those infections. That means that about 15% of people with those infections become more difficult to treat, or their path of treatment is more difficult. Not they're difficult, but the path of treatment is more difficult. And sometimes we're talking a year to 2 years to knock the germ load down to get somebody well. Okay, so I just want to kind of give you some ideas there. You raise a very interesting point with Bartonella, and the same point I have with Babesia too. Both Babesia and Bartonella replicate every 24 hours. So if we stop antibiotics and you're still in the middle of a treatment, the germs are going to come back quickly. That work you've done knocking down the germ load, it could be evaporated pretty quickly. So that's the point you're raising there. And I just want to share that with everyone. That is a valid concern. However, it doesn't matter in terms of continuous treatment as to whether it is herbal or prescription antibiotics that you're using, just as long as you're on something that is still killing the germs. Okay, all right. So in terms of safety of being on long-term antibiotics, there's a few things to think about. Number one, with any of the antibiotics you use, certain antibiotics have certain side effects. So for instance, with that Rifampin, you can get into inflammation of the liver. That's the main one to be concerned about here. So usually when I have somebody on Rifampin, I'm going to want to go ahead and do liver function tests, blood testing after about a month. And if it looks good, I may come back about 2 months later and do it again. And then usually about every 3 months, I might do it. So, okay, so your doctor should be working with you for just some periodic blood testing, okay? And then in terms of helping your liver handle these medicines, especially when you're on Rifampin, I like people to be on glutathione, and I prefer to have people be on liposomal glutathione. Liposomal glutathione is glutathione is a very powerful antioxidant that is made in every one of our cells, and its job is to repair cell damage, okay? But it also is made in large quantity in the liver, where it's used to detox things and to also protect the liver against injury. The product I like for liposomal glutathione is made by Research Nutritionals. Is something called Trifortify. The reason I prefer their product is they've done some really good testing of it to make sure that they got good absorption, that actually when people take it, it winds up getting absorbed into their bloodstream and then into their cells. Okay, so we have some documentation from Research Nutritionals that shows that that does happen. Okay. All right. So, and then if you do the Research Nutritionals Trifortify, a teaspoon is about 500 milligrams. And so when I've got somebody on a medicine that can affect the liver, I'm usually going to have a person take about 1 teaspoon once a day as part of the protection measures. Okay. All right. Then, the other problem we worry about long-term is being on antibiotics and the effect on the gut microbiome. So your intestinal microbiome is this very, very important organ. And it is, we used to think of it as just as the tube through which food you ate, and then the food got processed through your intestines, and then you released it through your rear end. But we now know it is involved in so many more things than food digestion and food processing. And in fact, we recognize that the gut is part of what is known as there is something called the intestinal microbiome axis. Okay. And so there's a number of axes. There's the gut brain axis. There is the gut immune system axis. There is the gut heart axis. There's the gut mental health axis. Basically the gut and the chemicals that are released by your healthy bacteria and the metabolites and the peptides and the chemical messengers that they release direct most of our body to function. All right. And it's a two-way street, actually. So not only do the germs release chemicals that communicate with our brain, but our brain communicates with the microbiome too. So it's really important to try to be careful with your microbiome, but that also has to be weighed against the risk of not using antibiotics and the harm that can happen from your tick-borne infection. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, basically. I mean, you need to kill your Bartonella, you need to kill your Lyme, but there is the risk of hurting the gut microbiome. Okay. So in terms of the gut microbiome, there's a number of things you can do. In fact, I just released an article today about it, and I'll be glad to show that to you here in a minute. But there's a whole host of things that you can do. The key things that you want to do is, number one, lifestyle. You want to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep to protect it, and you want to move. So people that are moving or exercising to a level you can tolerate, okay, do better with their gut than people that don't, okay? Number two, you want to try to do some things either with food, or if you can't do it with food, with supplements that feed the good bacteria in your intestines, okay? And two of the things that come out of your food that are very helpful are chemicals called polyphenols, and also plant-based fibers that act as prebiotics, okay? So there's chemicals called polyphenols that help your good bacteria work better and thrive even if you're on antibiotics. And then there's what are called prebiotics, which are fibers, plant-based fibers, or the sugars that come from plant-based fibers that feed your healthy bacteria in your gut, okay? So you either want to take a polyphenol supplement or a prebiotic supplement, or you want to get enough of them in your diet. And the way that you get enough of those in your diet is to have foods that are colorful fruits and vegetables, as well as beans, grains, and legumes. And berries are good too, because there are your sources of your plant, of your starchy fibers that are good as prebiotics, and they're also the sources of your polyphenols, okay? And so generally, I suggest people eat enough fiber out of their diet, so they're getting at least 30 grams of fiber a day. And probably if you're doing that and you're having lots of good fruits and vegetables, you're getting enough polyphenols as well too, all right? Now you can track this stuff if you really want to really get into it. You can track it using an app like My Fitness Pal, I think is what it's called. You can track your daily fiber, for instance. And if you're tracking well on daily fiber, you're getting enough prebiotics to feed your bacteria, okay? And then finally, there are a variety of probiotics that you can use that, depending on what your specific gut situation is, what gut symptoms you have, that will help protect and heal your gut, okay? And I'm not going to go through all those right now. I'll show you an article where you can look through it. It's kind of complicated, actually. There's a lot we've learned about the microbiome, okay? But do everything you can to protect the microbiome to help it thrive, even though you're on antibiotics. And there are things you can do, okay? All right. And then finally, as much as possible, I suggested people to do herbal antibiotics instead of prescription antibiotics. It seems that prescription antibiotics are more harmful than herbal antibiotics. Occasionally I will see people on herbal antibiotics that will get intestinal yeast overgrowth, but it is very much not as common as what I see with prescription antibiotics. Therefore, I tend to think herbal antibiotics are less harmful to the gut microbiome, basically. Okay. All right. And so, yeah, I like the idea that you might rotate in herbal antibiotics to replace your prescription antibiotics periodically. The one thing that is true is for some people, when it comes to treating Bartonella, the herbal antibiotics will work about 70-75% of the time. That's my experience, okay? While any prescription regimen you're on will work about 80-85% of the time. So maybe 5 to 10% better chance on the prescription than the herbal, okay? But they both still stand reasonable chances. If you were to look at an herbal combination to switch to, if you come off your prescriptions, you might stay on that cryptolepis, which is really good. And then you might combine it with liposomal cinnamon, clove, oregano. And the reason I would choose a cinnamon, clove, oregano is they're good for treating growing as well as hibernating or persister Bartonella. Okay. Your crypto is also good at treating growing and hibernating Bartonella as well too. And if you want to use a third herbal antibiotic at the same time with that, you could use Japanese knotweed. It also is useful at treating growing and persister Bartonella. Okay. All right. So yeah, I like that you're thinking about doing that. So I've said a lot of stuff. I want to show you some articles to take a look at here and some information. Okay. So let me do a quick screen share here. Oops, looks like I forgot to set it up to share. Hold on here just a minute, everyone. Bear with me a minute. I'm sorry about that. All right, let's try this again here. Okay, we should be okay here. All right, there you go. Sorry about that delay there. Let me get there. Okay, so this is my online Lyme guide. Many of you are familiar with it. This is where you can find out any kind of information. Okay, so there's two things I want to point you towards here. And so to show those two, I'm going to look at my tab here called The Latest, where if you're ever wondering what's the last thing I released, you can find it here. Okay. All right. So earlier today, I published this article called Good Shit, Your Guide to a Healthy Intestinal Microbiome, Even on Antibiotics. Okay. Now I got to caution, it's a long article because there's a lot of science behind this, and you have to make some careful choices about which probiotic you use. But I made it so that it's online, and also there's a PDF version that you can look at. But take a look at that. Okay. All right. Number two, in terms of herbal antibiotic options to treat Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia, take a look at this article. It focuses exclusively on herbal antibiotic options, and this is based on some of the latest research that has come out over the last couple of years showing what combination, or actually what individual herbs work. And then I've taken that information and put it together so you can figure out which combinations would be useful as well too. Okay, so those are two things to take a look at there. All right, and then finally, I mentioned the Trifortipri product here, so I just want to show you that too. Okay, so these are the various ways that Research Nutritionals presents its Trifortify product. There's different sizes, but these are what I was talking about, okay, in terms of a good form of your glutathione, okay? All right. Oh, I should also let you know, anyone, so this is my supplement store. As many of you know, I don't clinically see patients anymore, but I developed the store when I was still treating people, and then 99% of the products here are ones that I actually used directly on my patients. So I have a working knowledge that they're good products and that they work. So I've curated good quality products for you, okay? And then I want to let you know, anyone can order from me. I appreciate if you do that. And some advantages for you are, we ship fast. We're in the south central part of the United States. So if you're in the US, we can get it to you pretty quickly. Our goal is to have anything orders that you place before 2 p.m. on Friday go out the same day. Okay. And they do. And then the other thing we offer is free shipping for orders over $50. And then if you should happen to have any tax burden, we cover that for you as well too. Okay. All right. So anyhow, feel free to use us here. I appreciate your business too. Okay. All right, everyone. Let's see here. Thanks for that. Thanks for the question. Good luck to you. Sorry, I know it was rather long-winded, but I wanted to cover a number of things there. Hello, Shauna. Let's see. Is it beneficial to give your body a rest from taking the same meds? Crypto, Japanese knotweed, Hutania, Sedacuta, curcumin, vitamin supplements every day for over 2.5 years. Does your body get used to these med supplements over time? If so, how would a once in a while pulse work? Okay. So Shanna, as I was saying, with Bartonella Babesia, you don't want a pulse. If you still have sufficient symptoms of those infections going on in you and they're active, I would not stop the herbal antibiotics I would not exclusively stop, but I would, there's some other, you might switch in some ones that you're not using, although you're on just about on most herbs that we could wind up using here. Okay. But you may even need to consider working with a practitioner, see if you can get some prescriptions to cover you. Okay. All right. So number one, don't stop if you're treating. Now, it is okay to pulse if you are treating Borrelia. The reason it's okay to treat for Lyme Borrelia is we recognize that the Lyme germ is extremely slow growing. By some estimates, it replicates about every month, compared to the every 24 hours of the Borrelia Babesia that I was just talking about. So it's okay. It's so slow growing that if you stop for a while, it's often going to take a week, a month to 2 months before you even start getting symptomatic again from Bartonella if you haven't gotten it all treated all the way. Okay. Hold on here a minute. So that's one thing. The second thing is my rule of thumb with herbal antibiotics is I have found I don't necessarily need to rotate them in and out. If you are on herbal antibiotics that you've been on for a while and you're continuing to improve, and that's even a year or 2 years, I'll just leave a person on that regimen, okay? I wonder, though, if you've been on them that long, if they're not working well enough to get you all the way well, okay? And so I am not clear what you're treating here. I suspect with crypto, knotweed, Houttenia, pseudocuda, there is Bartonella here. You could, with the crypto Japanese knotweed, be covering Borrelia as well too. But if you are currently trying to treat Bartonella, and that's the only thing you're treating, and you're trying to look for an option other than these herbs, you might want to look at the cinnamon clove oregano capsules that I was talking about. Boy, I'm going to be hard pressed to find another herb for you to treat the Bartonella. If you have a provider involved, you may want to talk to them about even adding in a prescription to help you with that as well too. Okay. Curcumin and the vitamin supplements, they work. You're not going to develop resistance to those. All right. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Veronica. See, what is your opinion on triple testing for Bartonella with the Immunoblot, fish, and the enhanced ecPCR, which is kind of an enhanced PCR culture? All right. So let me talk about all those. So the Immunoblot, everyone, is a method that you can use through IGeneX that looks to see if you have antibodies. Your immune system has developed antibodies against Bartonella. And specifically, it looks to see if you have antibodies against 4 specific strains, and in addition, it tests to see if you have antibodies against the family. And the reason we want to do that is the Bartonella, we recognize there's at least 15 strains that can infect people. And so if you have a species test that's positive, but the strains, the 4 strains we can test for are negative, it means you got one of those other 11, all right? That test is beneficial at finding Bartonella if it's present about 95% of the time. So it's not a perfect test, okay? But it's when we say the ability of a test to find an infection, that's called the sensitivity. It's a very sensitive test. All right. Now the fish and the ecPCR test basically are not looking at how your immune system is working. It's not measuring an immune system reaction against the germ to tell if it's there. What it's doing instead is both of these rely on technology that helps see if the DNA of the germ is in you. And specifically with the fish test, we use a marker that attaches to the DNA of living germs, and then we look to see if we can see it under the microscope, okay? And this culture-enhanced PCR is basically, we're basically taking a blood draw, we're growing it in a culture that will help try to grow more strains of the germ And then we're going to look to see if we can see copies of the DNA using a technology called PCR testing. All right. So, but both the fish and the enhanced PCR ultimately are looking for genetic material. And here's the problem with that. We have no idea how sensitive the fish or the PCR testing is. No one has ever been able to do testing that shows us how good are these tests at determining if you have the infection, if it's there. All right. They are very good if they're positive. They truly are positive tests, because if you have the genetic material of the germ in you, that germ's in you. All right. So they're good in terms of accuracy. When it's positive, it really means you got the germ. But the trouble is, no one's been able to quantify how good is it at figuring out if you have the infection in you. All right. And so what the underlying problem is, especially with Bartonella, Bartonella tends to live inside cells. It doesn't tend to be in the mobile part of the blood that's swimming around, nor does it live in your red blood cells. It likes living in what's known as endothelial cells that are lining your blood vessels, for instance. It might get into fiber cells, but it's tending not to be in the substance of your blood. So if we stick a needle in you and we're drawing blood, there may be a good chance, we have no idea what the chance is that germ is swimming by right at the same time. Okay. So I tend to see those as having lower sensitivity, although no one's been able to quantify how sensitive they are. So what I would go with this first is probably get your Immunoblot. If you get a positive answer to it, then you can stop there. All right. And again, it's because Immunoblot probably is a more sensitive test. Okay. All right. But if that doesn't find it and you still want laboratory confirmation as to whether you have Bartonella, then I think I would probably go with probably the fish test next. I think it's a little bit less expensive, maybe as accurate as the ecPCR is as well too. Okay. All right. So that's what my thoughts would be. I tend not to gunshot test. I try to think through logically what's going to give me the greatest chance of finding it and not spend all your money basically doing the whole panel of testing like that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Veronica. Let's see. How do you address gut dysbiosis when taking an antibiotic regimen? All right. So that's kind of what I was trying to show you earlier. I just released a whole article on that. So take a look at that article. So there are certain probiotics you can use if you do have dysbiosis, though. And so earlier I said, basically, make sure you're getting sleep, that you're moving around, that you're choosing a healthy diet. And if you can't choose a healthy diet, get on polyphenols. And get on prebiotics, okay? But then there's a host of different probiotics that you can take depending on what's happening in the gut, okay? So dysbiosis means that you have an unhealthy balance of bacteria. And if you are having symptoms of that unhealthy balance, that can be things like gassiness and bloating. It can be increased food sensitivities. And so those kind of symptoms suggest that you might be developing or have something called leaky gut. Okay. So let's talk about that real quick, because that if you do, then there's a certain group of probiotics that I would have you use. Okay. All right. So what happens in your intestines is basically you have one layer of cells. You have the inside of the intestines. You have a layer of cells. You've got all your immune cells. 60 to 70% of the body's immune system sits underneath these cells. And then you have your blood vessels. Okay. And on top of these cells is a mucus layer called mucin that kind of protects these cells. All right. Now, mucin is promoted by a healthy intestinal bacteria called Akkermansia. All right. And And if you have adequate amounts of Akkermansia, you're going to make good mucin levels, and you're going to have a good protective layer from the mucin, and these cells probably are going to be held together very tight. Now, if you get dysbiosis, it could be that the part of the bacteria that gets knocked off that should be good, but still may not be as much, is Akkermansia. Okay. All right. Secondly, what happens is if you do get an imbalance of bacteria here, these cells can pull apart and you get gaps. And if you do get gaps, you're going to start getting food particles hitting your immune cells here that shouldn't be hitting them, basically. All right. So in normal functioning intestines, the way that digestion works is your healthy bacteria inside the intestines will digest food into microscopic amounts that can only be identified as an amino acid or as a carbohydrate or as a protein, but can't be identified as coming from corn or coming from wheat, for instance, okay? And the way that these small particles get into your bloodstream down here, they can't go through these gaps because there's no gaps, and they get absorbed through these cells, these healthy intestinal cells, and then they get passed through these immune cells, and then they get absorbed into the bloodstream, all right? And they don't inflame them because it's just amino acids, sugars, and fats that are getting through, all right? Now, if you get thinning of this mucin layer, and if you get unhealthy bacteria here, sometimes what happens, or even unhealthy yeast, you get a plumping and pulling apart, you get gaps, and you get partially digested food that comes through, and it hits 60 to 70% of your body's immune cells sit here, and it can trigger those cells to become inflamed, releasing cytokines, releasing histamines, and that's what leaky gut syndrome is, all right? So if with your dysbiosis, you have a lot of intestinal symptoms like gasiness, bloating, cramping, or you have a degree of food intolerance or food allergies, I want to choose a probiotic that has a good chance of helping rebuild that mucin and helping with leaky gut, all right? And so I like working for that with a product that's called Metabolic Daily by Pendulum. And Metabolic Daily has 5 different strains or 5 different species of probiotics in it. Number one, it's got Akkermansia. Akkermansia is good at rebuilding that mucin layer and also releases a bunch of messenger chemicals to the good bacteria in the intestine, telling them to grow better, okay, and to act better, basically, right? Interestingly enough, too, Akkermansia is helpful at sending signals to your intestines to make more of a chemical called GLP-1, which is the chemical influenced by the weight loss diabetes medicines called semaglutide. So Akkermansia may help with weight and sugar controls as well, too, all right? Also in that Metabolic Daily product, there is a type of bifidobacterium that will help ferment fibers, your prebiotic fibers that you get in the diet, and supply its fermentation products to 3 other bacteria that are in that probiotic that are great at creating something called butyrate. And butyrate is the cell fuel that works on your intestine cells to get them to heal and fill up those gaps and get rid of your leaky gut. Okay. So if I've got somebody that has symptoms suggesting leaky gut, like cramping, gasiness, bloating, or even increased food sensitivities, I want my prebiotic or my probiotic, I should say, to be the Metabolic Daily, and I would have a person take 1 or 2 times a day. Okay. Now, if you don't have any GI symptoms and you're just more concerned about dysbiosis because of imbalance created by being on antibiotics, then what my choice is to use a spore-forming probiotic, either called Corebiotic or something called Megaspore, and the Megaspore biotic. And those are made up of something called bacillus. And bacillus is a bacteria that doesn't even live in us. It actually comes from soil. But once it gets in us, it sends out a bunch of signals to the other bacteria in the intestines, telling them to grow and to be more active. Okay, so it helps rehabilitate the intestines and protect the intestines. So basically, the general approach I would look at is either doing if you've got GI symptoms, work with the metabolic daily I was suggesting about. If you don't, but you're really just trying to use a probiotic that's preventive to keep you from getting into dysbiosis or symptomatic dysbiosis, then I would use a core biotic or a megaspore biotic, and I would do those as 1 or 2 pills 1 time a day. Okay. All right. So let me just do a quick screen share here for you. So this whole thing about probiotics is getting more complicated. It's not as simple as saying, take a probiotic, because we're now starting to get to the point with probiotics that we understand they have different things that they do better. Certain ones do certain things better, and we would use them in certain conditions. So in my new article that I just released, I kind of laid out under what situations would you use which probiotic. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. Okay, so at my supplement store, I have a page that is called probiotics and prebiotics. Okay, all right. And probably should say, and polyphenols too. All right. So again, if you're not getting enough polyphenols in your diet, then you want to take a supplement. So this is the polyphenol booster here. If you are not getting enough fiber from a diet rich in whole foods, plant fibers, then you would want to take the Mega Pre. Where's Mega Pre? Mega Pre, which is right here. This is full of non-digestible plant starches that act as a prebiotic, okay? And then your 2 spore-forming probiotic products are this Megaspore biotic here, and there is the Core Biotic Sensitive or Core Biotic. Those are your spore-forming probiotics that I was telling you about, all right? And then in terms of the one, if you've got some leaky gut symptoms, then I suggest using this metabolic daily product here that's got the 5 different organisms in it. Okay. All right. All right. And then again, in my article, the last part of the article is my gut health action plan. Okay. The first part says, be careful about the antibiotics you choose and decide if you really even need to use them. All right. The second part says there's non-dietary lifestyle steps you should take. One of those, sleeping 7 to 9 hours. One is moving and exercise. Okay. The second part says, make sure you're getting enough polyphenols and fibers, because that's what feeds your good bacteria. And you could either do it using the polyphenol capsules or a prebiotic capsule, using both actually, because they both have different actions, or you can get it through your diet, and I talk with you about here. All right. And then finally, the last part 3, is select your probiotic. Okay. And so I have one part that says, if you don't have any symptoms of leaky gut, use a spore-forming probiotic. If you do have symptoms of leaky gut, use that metabolic daily product, basically. Okay. All right. And then I also talk about, if you, within the world of gut health, we're now recognizing there's something called postbiotics. And what a postbiotic is basically it has all the good chemicals from your intestines without any living germs. And basically what they do with the postbiotic is they have healthy donors that give these companies poop, all right? And then they autoclave them in high heat to kill living germs. And essentially what is left is 800 different messenger chemicals from the healthy microbiome that tell the brain to work correctly, the immune system to work correctly, and also release factors that support your good bacteria in your gut, okay? And so the only postbiotic supplement out there right now is a product made by a company called Thanabiotic, which is, at this point, is only allowed through doctors that have it in their offices. You can't get it online. But I'm negotiating with them to start making it available through e-commerce And I think that's going to happen here pretty soon. So and people that get repeated yeast infections or repeated dysbiosis with symptoms and the metabolic daily is not working, I would add to that this postbiotic, basically. Okay. That's a lot of stuff. You can read it here in the article, though. Okay. And the other thing I'd show you on the article, because it is really long, it's just a lot of complicated stuff. I've made it so you can actually download a PDF of it, so you can actually read it offline if you want to as well, too. Okay. All right. There you go. Let's see here. Thanks for the question. Hello, Rosie. Let's see. Have you ever heard of Bartonella getting into the heart? So yeah, Bartonella. So what happens with Bartonella again is it lives. One of the places it likes to live is the endothelial cells that line the inside of your blood vessels, which means it can get into the endothelial cells of the blood supply to the heart. Okay, and so if it gets there, it can lead to heart muscle problems. It can lead to heart contraction problems, and it even can get into the cells that make up the covering of the heart or your pericardium, and people can get pericarditis as well too. So yeah, it could affect the heart mainly through its involvement in the blood vessel system that feeds the heart, basically. Okay, all right. Thanks for the question, Rosie. Hello, Pedro. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I recently started having Lyme disease symptoms after 10 years in remission. My current symptoms include daily headaches, joint pain, scalp sensitivity, ear ringing, hyperacusis, and dizziness. IGeneX testing confirmed my initial Lyme diagnosis 10 years ago. However, I recently had new blood work done via IGeneX, and all tests came back negative for Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia. I am almost certain this is a relapse. So how common is it to have false negative blood results with chronic Lyme? Another recent blood work detected that I have MTHFR mutation, A1298C heterozygous. Is it possible that my health struggles are associated with this gene mutation and not chronic Lyme, despite symptoms being similar to when I had a confirmed Lyme diagnosis? Pedro. Okay. Pedro, I just want to look at one part of your question here just a minute. Okay. So a number of comments for you. Okay. All right. So first of all, it is possible to have a relapse and have negative testing. All right. I just want to start by saying that. And part of the reason is if you have active infection going on, it could be that there is enough infection going on that it suppresses the immune system. And so therefore, the immune system is not able to make antibodies that we measure when we do testing from IGeneX, for instance. Okay, so they just may not be there. All right. But another thing that you should consider, and that I see as a leading cause of what looks like a relapse but is not a relapse, is developing too many yeast living in your intestines. All right. Now, I know that may sound kind of crazy, but just hear me out on this. So because you took antibiotics, either herbal or prescription, during the time you were treated 10 years ago, if when you were done being treated, you did not do what I call gut rehab, or you didn't use probiotics for an extended period of time afterwards, and postbiotics. Now, postbiotics were not available before, but if you did not do things to rebuild the health of your gut when you were done, you will be at a setup for yeast that living in your intestines down the road growing too much. Okay. All right. So when you have too many yeast in your intestines, they trigger the cells that line the immune cells that line the intestines to overproduce cytokines and to overproduce histamines. All right. And so basically, you can get into a cytokine excess situation and histamine excess situation, which is the same thing can happen when you have active Lyme or active Bartonella, whatever your tick-borne infection is. So when we look at what the majority of symptoms are that people have with tick-borne infections, they're actually due to the immune system overreacting and making too many cytokines and sometimes making too many histamines, okay? Those are the key symptom causers. It's the same thing that happens with mold toxicity. The reason you have symptoms of mold toxicity is due to cytokine excess. Likewise, if you develop too many yeast in your intestines, they lead to an overproduction of cytokines, okay? And excess cytokines give you insomnia, make you hurt all over, can give you headaches, can give you neurologic dysfunction, can give you joint pain, et cetera, okay? Those symptoms that we call Lyme symptoms or that we call mold toxicity symptoms or that we call yeast overgrowth symptoms, they all can look the same because they have an underlying common thing going on, which is excess cytokines, all right? So in my practice, what I found is about 80% of the time that somebody came to see me and they were complaining of what looked like a Lyme relapse, if I just sat and talked with them, I could figure out that probably for about 80% it was due to intestinal yeast overgrowth. Okay, so things you would look at are, number one, have you had any increased sugar cravings? Are you having more intestinal gasiness and bloating? Are you having difficulty swallowing? Because sometimes you can get yeast even up here in your food pipe, all right? And then if you do get yeast dysbiosis, the toxins that get released can sometimes go to the skin and interact with the skin and lead to more pimples and acne or even more eczema or allergic type skin conditions too, all right? And then finally, another symptom that people will have sometimes when they have intestinal yeast overgrowth is they notice they have more sugar sensitivity than usual. And by that, I mean usually when people have sugar, it doesn't knock them out, all right? But people that have too many yeast in the intestines, when you feed your yeast with too much sugar, what happens is you will feel worse the next day. You'll have more hangover effect. You have more cloudiness in your brain. You may just feel more fatigued. You might get more gassy and bloated too. All right. So if any of those symptoms are going on with you, I would think about looking at treating intestinal yeast overgrowth first. Okay. All right. And then finally, no, I don't, MTHFR, it's a kind of a place many of us ran to about 5 or 6 years, no, probably about 8 years ago. Frankly, most of us have never found great benefits from doing anything about these MTHFR mutation defects. I'll be honest with you about that. And I think what happens is, so what MTHFR means, it stands for something called methatetrahydrofolate reductase. All right, it's an enzyme. And basically, you've got a defect in one of the genes of the two that program what this enzyme is going to look like, and therefore it could affect its performance, all right? What that enzyme is involved in doing is taking folate from your diet and converting it to a methylated form of folate, which is an activated form of folate, all right? And you need to have activated folate to eventually set off a number of detox reactions, ultimately leading to the production of glutathione. All right, so we had assumed if you had a defect in that gene that you might not make enough of this methylated folate. And that could be true. However, remember I was just talking about the gut and the microbiome and the important role it plays, all right? So we recognize that the gut has, I think, by some estimates, the amount of DNA in your gut or genetic material in your gut makes up 90% of our body's genetic material, 90%, all right? So all those germs in the gut are doing stuff for us, all right? We're not just letting them around for a free ride. And one of the things that they could do is make the methylated folate for us, all right? So just having a genetic blueprint that says you're going to develop a problem doesn't mean you will develop the problem, in part because we got this whole gut microbiome going on there that may make up for it, basically. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you, do a quick screen share here and show you a couple things. All right. So take a look at my online Lyme guide. And there's a section called the yeast section here. And read my article about how to figure out if you might have too many yeast. Okay. All right. And if you do, that you need to treat. And here is how I would treat it over here in this article. Generally, what I found in my practice is about 80% of the time, if I spent a month to 2 months cleaning out yeast in people, they would get back on their way. And that's all that their decline really was. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Thanks, Kelly. Great luck with matching glasses. You know, I was running around trying to get myself ready for the webinar, and I put this shirt on. I had been sitting here working in my t-shirt earlier, and I put this on, and I didn't pay attention to the color until I sat down and had the camera. I can see myself on my computer screen. I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's interesting. So, well, I didn't plan it, but yeah, they do go together well, and I appreciate the comment there. Thank you. Hello, Shelley. Let's see, is there a way to determine if symptoms are from a Lyme relapse? So it's kind of a carryover from the last question that we had. So the problem is we don't have good testing that really says a germ is active, okay? Because even like in the previous situation, if the testing from IGeneX had said, yeah, you've got antibody, Immunoblot antibody test was positive, well, that doesn't tell us if it was positive from the old infection, because antibodies may not go away, just so you know, okay? Or is it positive from a reactivated infection, all right? And I could go through a number of other tests that people do, but the bottom line is any testing we do is not accurate to determining whether you have new or old infection or reactivated infection. So the testing is not a reliable way of telling, all right? What I have found is the best way to look at this is to determine clinically if it can be. And the first place, I will look at is make sure it's not too many yeast. And if there's a chance it could be too many yeast, I will treat for the too many yeast. And if we do that for a month or two and people aren't getting much better, then I'm going to clinically say, yep, it probably is a Lyme relapse. Okay. All right. So that's kind of what my approach is on it. Good luck to you, Shelley. Hello, Carol. Like the comment above, I too am concerned if this is dangerous about long-term antibiotic use. When I do go off antibiotics, give my gut time to recover, I begin to crash. I think I've addressed that earlier. Yeah, I mean, I understand. To figure out whether it's you're crashing because of germs or crashing for another reason, I would have to ask you a bunch of other questions, which I obviously can't do in this kind of a format. But it's a valid concern, and that's why I created that new article about protect your gut. You have to use antibiotics, but there's many things you can do to protect the gut. So take a look at that article, okay? Sorry for the coughing, everyone. I actually got some kind of 2 evenings ago, I started coming down with this respiratory thing, and I thought it was allergies, but I think it's something viral. Unfortunately, I'm feeling physically okay, but I still got this little bit of a cough going on, so I apologize for that. Let's see, I had a root canal, and about 3 days later, I started having fever and chills. I already had Lyme and Bartonella symptoms. I started getting tachycardia, aches, and pains all over my body. I suggested it might be a parasitic infection, having troubles getting treated. would normal rows and be of any help, or should I go ahead and pursue the protocol? When I try to take cryptolepis, does it go well? I'm waiting to see a Lyme literate doctor. I'm taking the cinnamon clove oregano. I think I have Bartonella. Appreciate any suggestions. Hope you are getting your family situation taken care of. Things are going well for you with your transition to Texas. Thank you. Yeah, so the transition is going well here. And what you're referring to is just the death of my mom in January. My father immediately followed with a heart attack and a stroke. And then I had to put down one of my two Basenji dogs here about 2 months ago. So it's just been an awful start to the year, but I'm getting through it. I appreciate it. I'm transitioning well here. So thank you for that. There's one concern I have in that. So fever and chills can mean infection. All right. And unless fever and chills had been part of your syndrome of infections before the root canal, I would be concerned that during the root canal, they cause some oral bacteria or other bacteria to get released into your bloodstream. What you were having is an immune reaction. And if that is the case, and you've basically been having fever and chills since that began only with having the dental procedures done, I would bring it up with your periodontist and say, hey, I'm concerned. I've been having fever and chills. And they should look into it. They should look and see whether there is some blood infection that they caused, okay? Beyond that, in terms of designing a treatment for you, that's kind of hard to do here just because I need to ask you a lot of questions, of which I can't do it in this format, obviously. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Susan. Let's see. May I ask if you know anything about using nicotine patches to remove spike proteins in people suffering with, I would assume you mean long COVID there. I have not seen that. Okay. This whole idea about so for some people with long COVID, there is a concern that they may stay inflamed from having spike protein that the immune system can't clear. Okay. Now there's a myriad of other things that go on that can be part of long COVID, but that could be just one part of it. The difficulty is there is not a scientific proven way to get rid of the spike protein. And there are people that have theories. So you've got Dr. Bruce Patterson that thinks you can get rid of it by using an HIV/AIDS medicine called Miravec, along with a statin medication. And he has some limited research he did looking at that. The trouble is it's never been verified by anybody else. All right. So he's got one theory out there. I've seen people use his Miravec as well as his statin protocol and really just get nowhere. I think it's a mixed bag. There's some people that do, but a lot of people don't. Okay. You've got the FLCCC, which is the docs that believe strongly that ivermectin can save the world. And I say that sarcastically, but there are groups of people that think ivermectin is the drug that's going to save everything. And there's a lot of them that are part of FLCCC. So I've looked at the data about the effectiveness of ivermectin. All right. And it's a mixed bag. There are some studies that say it may treat active COVID, but on the whole, the majority of the studies have said, no, it's not a useful agent. Okay. But one thing that ivermectin can do, there's a couple of things it can do that can help. Number one, it modulates the cytokine picture in anyone. I mean, even people with Lyme, it can modulate cytokines. Okay. So you feel better being on it. But it's also thought it may bind to that spike protein. And so maybe it could have some benefit again, but we don't have studies looking at that, unfortunately. Okay. And then I know there's a bunch of stuff a number of people are trying, but I would tell you is that probably none of it has a lot of scientific foundation behind it. I'll have to look into this one. I'm not aware that people are using that. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. I just want to do a quick screen share here. So if you're looking about what to do for long COVID, it is a lot more than just spike protein. Okay, so let me just do a quick screen share here. There we go. All right, so okay, so here's an article I wrote about how to approach long COVID, and it recognizes that there's just a multitude of things that can be going on with people with long COVID. Okay. So part of it may be for some people that there is persistent infection, although we don't have a decent test to show that. Another part of it is that people with long COVID may have organ and blood vessel damage from the virus having used these ACE receptors to work its way in. And specifically, you may get vascular injury because the lining of the blood vessels is covered by something called the endothelial glycocalyx. And that glycocalyx basically functions, when it's working correctly, leads to the production of nitric oxide that keeps your blood vessels dilated. It also keeps blood clots from forming. So one of the theories you hear about long COVID is that it's all due to microclots. Well, probably if we step back one step further, it's because of damage to the endothelial glycocalyx. Okay. Another thing that happens in long COVID is you get injury to the mitochondria cell factories. A big thing that people get is they get a disruption to the intestinal microbiome. And then finally, you get chronic inflammation. All right. So there's an approach that has some scientific validation behind it that was put together by a group called OLA that looked at addressing all of these factors at the same time. And I looked at their science, and I think it looks pretty good. And I've modified their protocol a little bit because I think they were a little bit weak on immune dysregulation, and they were a little bit weak on their approach to fixing mitochondria. But take a look at the protocol here. It's pretty comprehensive. I know there's a lot of things to do, but it's a problem that has a multi-factor set of stuff going on. It's not just the spike protein, for instance. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see. Hello, Joan. Let's see. Middle-aged son has untreated Lyme Bartonella. May you please recommend a practitioner, or Jean, I should say. Depends on where in the country you are. Jean, and I may or may not have somebody, depending on where your son is, but feel free to send me an email with a description of where your son is, okay? And then I might be able to give you some ideas. And so look at my email address is docmarty, it's DOCMARTY at martyrossmd.com, okay? Now, everyone, I'm giving my email address to Jean. Please don't flood my email box with your individual questions. This is just for Jean, okay? All right. Thanks. So yeah, get that information to me, Jean. I'll see if I can provide you some information. Okay. Hello, Kelly. Let's see the question. Which, if any, specialized test do you recommend, if any, for me to further investigate possible chronic Lyme? Do my initial tests rule out co-infections since they're low? The context. Had my first ever testing via LabCorp and had low CD8, CD57 lymphocyte numbers, which resonates with me as I have been struggling with delusional OCD for 20 years and have other PANS type syndrome flags. The other LabCorp blot tests for Lyme and co-infections were fine, so my naturopath hasn't freaked out yet and is retesting the CD8, CD57 LabCorp again. I'm inclined to do further specialized testing through IGeneX because my longstanding severe neurologic challenges haven't responded well to various psychotherapies and many psychiatric medications. And at 2 years old, I was bitten by a giant black fly and had my entire right half of my face swollen with eyelid totally sealed shut. At the time, doctors had said worst case scenario was brain infection. Other PANS, let's see. Other PANS flags, various sinus infections, pneumonia, as well as appendicitis post-surgery infection that happened the same year my OCD really blossomed. My naturopath gave me IGeneX price sheet, and there are so many different tests. So I'm wondering how to choose which to do, even if just testing for Lyme and Bartonella, which I hear from Dr. Gary Kaplan presents as OCD, and I wouldn't have suspected it had more than chronic Lyme. Okay, so I will be glad to help look at that with you. All right, so first of all, let me talk about that CD57 count. So CD57 is a type of white blood cell that of many types of white blood cells that we have. Okay. We know that it can be low about 80% of the time that people have Lyme. However, it is unlikely that Lyme and tick-borne infections are the only thing that cause it to become low. All right. So the only tick-borne infection we've seen it associated with is Borrelia, Lyme. Okay. We know that, for instance, though, HIV can cause it to be low. I'm not saying you have HIV, but I'm just saying there are other things that trigger it to become low. And it's possible it can be low from chronic viral infections as well, too. All right. So in and of itself, it is not diagnostic of a tick-borne infection. All right. But we do know that tick-borne infections, especially Bartonella, can be part of PANS and pandas. All right. And it is also possible that Borrelia and even Babesia can be part of those infections as well, too. So if you're trying to look and see, is there an infectious cause under this? And so, PANS and pandas can be autoimmune, but it also can be due to active infections. And the active infections, the main ones from a tick-borne standpoint, would be Bartonella, Borrelia, or Babesia, with the greatest chance being Bartonella. Bartonella, when it's there, can give you a lot of neuropsychologic stuff, basically. Okay, all right. So if you were to look at testing, what I would suggest doing is Immunoblot testing through IGeneX. So the Immunoblot method, let me talk about that real quickly, and then I'll go through, I'll pull up a test sheet that we'll look at together. I'll show you which test numbers to get, okay? All right. So the Immunoblot is a method that IGeneX has come up with that looks to see, do you have antibodies against very specific proteins that are found on these germs, all right? What makes IGeneX the best is they test for most strains, all right? So on their Borrelia Immunoblot, they're looking to see if you have antibodies against 8 strains of Borrelia, all right? That LabCorp Western blot, or even ELISA test you would have had done, was only looking to see if you have a reaction against the original East Coast strain of Borrelia. We now recognize there's 8 different strains, okay? So basically the two-step Western blot ELISA test that LabCorp does is a waste of money, all right? All right. For Bartonella, the IGeneX is looking with their Immunoblot to see if you have antibodies against the entire family, which means it can figure out if you have one of the 15 strains that might give you Bartonella and neuropsych symptoms. And for Babesia, the Immunoblot, again, looks to see if you have antibodies against a couple strains of Babesia, but also the entire family. So it can pick up the additional 15 to 20 strains of Babesia that might lead to problems too. All right. Now, it is possible, although we focus on ticks, Bartonella is probably spread to a greater degree by other vectors. So maybe from that fly. All right. There are some anecdotal reports or limited scientific reports as well, too, that say Borrelia can be transmitted by biting flies as well, too. All right. Just limited. They're not the highest quality studies, but it's possible. All right. So I'm going to do a screen share and I'm going to pull up the LabCorp sheet and we'll look at it together. I'm going to show you a couple things here, actually. All right, so let's look at, go to my testing section here. Okay, so here's an article where I talk about why the Immunoblot testing method is the best way to go. Okay, so you may want to take a look here. And I meant in this article to actually put the test numbers down, and I think I forgot to do it. Yeah. Okay. So let's go look at a test sheet together, and that way I can show you which the test numbers are. So because that IGeneX lab order sheet is very confusing. All right. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. Okay. So this is the IGeneX test requisition form. All right. And I would ignore all of these panels. I just think it's a way for them to get more money, to be honest with you. And I know they don't like me saying that. I think it's better to do targeted testing and relying just on the Immunoblot methods. Okay, so ignore page 1. All right. All right, then in this Borrelia section, you want to do this test 325, which is the Lyme Immunoblot IgM, and test 335, which is the Lyme Immunoblot IgG. Okay, just those two, nothing else from the Lyme section, all right? For Babesia, you want to do this test 900, I'm kind of circling it here, and test 905, which is the Immunoblot IgM and IgG. So test 900 and 905, all right? In the Bartonella section, you want to do test 374, 384, and that's the Immunoblot IgM and Immunoblot IgG. Okay, and that's all I would do there. All right. Again, the reason I focus just on doing the Immunoblots is that they have, based on testing from IGeneX, they appear to have a sensitivity, the ability to find those infections of about 95%, okay? So it's your best testing method to see if you might have those infections, all right? All right. Good luck to you, Kelly. Hello, William. Let's see. What would be your best treatment protocol for a chronic Bartonella infection causing gastritis? Years ago, I had Bartonella positive in the jejunum and mycoplasma in the stomach, also positive for Bartonella twice in the spinal fluid, and through blood. Worst symptoms now is stomach pain. Are currently on Cryptolepis, Hutania, Tobabark, Unicarin Max, and probiotics. Any chance this could be SIBO? Also had Lyme, ehrlichiosis, babesiosis, went underdiagnosed many years, originally diagnosed in 2001. Okay. So, just a couple thoughts, and you may be aware of this too, but so Cryptolepis, which I think is a great herb at killing Babesia, Bartonella, and Borrelia. I think it does a great job. it can really be hard on the stomach. So I assume you were having gastritis before starting the cryptolepis. But if it got a lot worse on the cryptolepis, it may be a result of side effect of the cryptolepis. Okay, so it just can be harsh. The other comment I would make is if you're having a lot of gastritis symptoms and you're using alcohol-based tinctures, the alcohol itself can be very irritating to the stomach lining too. And so one of the things I recommend to my patients that are using alcohol-based tinctures, which I like because I think you get a very potent amount of active ingredients using an alcohol extraction. Okay, so I think there's good reasons to use alcohol-based tinctures, but again, the alcohol can be kind of harsh to the lining. So what you can do is you can steam off a lot of it. And so what I'll have my patients do with these problems is I'll have them boil up water, and then they'll wind up taking maybe an ounce or two of that boiled water, and you take your drops for your dose. Like if it's 10, you just drop 10 drops of the medicine, the herbal tincture into the water. That hot water will steam off the majority of alcohol, not all of it, but the majority of it. And then you can, as that cools down, you can drink it. And often that is more tolerable as well too. Okay. All right. Now, I would assume that you have been looked at by gastroenterology. Somebody has scoped down into your stomach and done all these biopsies, because that's what you said. And I would assume that they've made sure that you don't have H. pylori, but that would be another thing to consider with that gastritis. SIBO is not, with small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, is not something I have seen lead to persistent gastritis. Okay. Let me see here. So anyhow, those are some thoughts about looking further. Okay. In terms of gastritis, again, I don't know if you can get help from a Lyme litter, a doctor, somebody prescribed, but it may be that the prescription medicines are going to be a bit easier on your gut, on your gastritis, than taking the herbal tinctures. Okay. All right. So you might look at a combination of azithromycin, which often can be pretty easy on the stomach, combined with methylene blue, which often can be fairly easy on the stomach as well too. So it'd be azithromycin 500 milligrams one time a day. And then methylene blue, you get it compounded into pills, and you start at either 50 or 25 or 50 milligrams twice a day. There were experiments done out of Johns Hopkins University, the lab, probably about maybe 1 or 2 years ago now, looking at various combinations of antibiotics that would be the most effective at Bartonella biofilm, Bartonella growing forms, and Bartonella persister forms. And that combination of azithromycin, methylene blue was a good one. The other combination was Rifampin, methylene blue. The trouble with Rifampin, it can be very nauseating too. So I'd kind of shy away from that one with you. But those are some thoughts for you to look at. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Juan. Hi, Helen. So, fermented foods and kefir can be sources of probiotics, but my experience is there's just not enough in them to make a difference. I find it better to actually use probiotic capsules instead, to be honest, or in addition to it. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Susan says, your explanation of dysbiosis was amazing. Now I understand what is happening to me. Thanks so much. You're welcome. I hope that gives you some help there too. Yeah, it kind of helps to visualize it. I wish instead of waving my hands in front of you and showing it, I actually had a diagram I could show people. But I hope you got the idea from there. Thank you for saying that. see. Veronica says, what is your opinion of Metabolic Daily versus Akkermansia supplements from Pendulum? Which would you choose over the other? All right. So Pendulum has Akkermansia in all of their probiotic supplements. Okay. So they have a supplement called Akkermansia. Okay. They have a supplement called Metabolic Daily. They've got a new one called GLP-1 Control, I believe. And they have another one, I believe, that's called Diabetes Control. All right. The main difference in all of these is there's two differences. So there's differences in the amount of Akkermansia within each of these products. And in addition, within each of these products, there are other probiotic germs. Okay. So their Akkermansia has the least amount of Akkermansia in it. I believe that the amount that's in the Metabolic Daily is more, and there's even more in the GLP-1 product, and then there's even a greater amount in their diabetes control one. Okay, so they kind of go up in terms of Akkermansia. All right. So what I prefer out of all those, again, for what happens in people in Lyme, is I like their Metabolic Daily product the best for, well, actually, if you don't have any GI problems going on, you're just really trying to work to promote healthy bacteria levels, and you're on antibiotics, but you don't have any symptoms that suggest leaky gut, there's no GI dysfunction going on, but you want some glucose control, you want some metabolic control, I would look at just using pure Akkermansia by itself, okay? And you could do 1 or 2 pills. If, as I was saying earlier, you've got some GI symptoms going on suggesting maybe some leaky gut, then I would go for the Metabolic Daily. And you can do 1 or 2 pills once a day. The reason, again, I like the Metabolic Daily is the Akkermansia in there is going to be helping to replenish, rebuild the mucin layer that I described earlier, okay? And then you've got 3 butyrate producers along with bifidobacterium that are all creating a lot of short-chain fatty acids, of which the big one is butyrate. And butyrate helps the intestinal cells to heal and close those gaps. I tend to like that one the best, okay? All right. Now, if you don't have any antibiotics you're using and you don't have any leaky gut, you're really trying to use the Akkermansia products from Pendulum more for metabolic regulation, diabetes, weight loss, vascular health, then the most potent one would be their glucose control one. And more recently, again, they came out with one, they branded it as, I think, GLP-1, and that's more targeted at the idea of weight loss and diabetes management, okay? All right. I hope that gives you a good explanation there. Let's see. Hello, Joe. Let's see. Will Bartonella cause your Achilles tendon tightness and pain? Also, what dose of methylene blue do you recommend for Bart? Okay. So again, the Bartonella dose, I recommend 50 milligrams twice a day. I know some of my colleagues are having benefit at 25 milligrams twice a day. And then Richard Horowitz in his dapsone protocols works with ridiculously high amounts of methylene blue, trying to counter the effect of the ridiculous amounts of dapsone he uses, meaning high dose dapsone can lead to methemoglobinemia and people turn blue. And so he'll have them take all the way up to 600 milligrams a day of methylene blue. I sometimes think he should have called his dapsone protocol the methylene blue protocol, because it may be, if people do get benefit, it's all from the methylene blue. But it's hard to tell with Richard Horowitz's protocols because he basically throws everything at a person. It's just a lot of stuff he puts in there. So anyhow, that's my commentary. But in terms of, I think I find benefit either at 25 or 50 milligrams twice a day. I think I've gotten the most benefit at 50 milligrams twice a day. Okay. And yeah, you can get tendinitises from either Bartonella or Borrelia, and they can affect the Achilles tendon. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Elizabeth. Let's see. What can I do if I have extremely low blood pressure? My doctor said to take salt pills, but I'm concerned with how low it is. I had Lyme for years and suffered a subsequent stroke, then treated with disulfiram in 2020. Thanks. All right. So a starting point always is working with the salt. And then I also will let you know, I know the numbers look low, but a low blood pressure technically is a blood pressure that causes you problems. All right. So some people get enough blood flow to the brain and to the heart with a blood pressure of 75 or 55. Some people do not. So if you are starting to get brain symptoms or chest pain symptoms with that kind of low blood pressure, it's too low. Okay. All right. When somebody does take salt and that doesn't seem to work, the next step is to take medicines that can help squeeze the blood vessels tighter. And so there's something called midodrine is one. You can also use steroid type medicines to tell the kidneys to hold more sodium and minerals in the body, to hold more water in the blood vessel to expand the blood supply. With that kind of a blood pressure, though, you'd be best seeing a cardiologist. They don't even have to agree with tick-borne illnesses, but they should be working with medications with you to help stabilize that blood pressure. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Elizabeth. Oops. Oh, darn. Aline, I'm sorry. I was trying to post your question and I just deleted it and I don't have a way of getting it back. So I apologize for that. Well, I think that's it, guys. All right. So I've had a good time being with you tonight. And I don't know if I'll be quite as color coordinated next week for you. Anyhow, good to be with you. I missed being away to do our last webinar, so I'm glad I was able to be here with you. Look in your emails tomorrow morning. I will have a synopsis of what we discussed along with a link to the recording. And again, you'll be able to sign up for next week's webinar as well, too. And again, join me in my quest to help people. Share what we're doing with everyone, anyone you know that might benefit. Okay. And that means go ahead and send the email tomorrow morning to people living with Lyme or tick-borne infections that might benefit in joining us here in the future. Okay. All right. Enjoyed being with you, everyone. Good luck. And I hope your journeys through the world of Lyme show improvement for you. Okay. All right. Good night, everyone.